Today we're going to go over the Durston X-mid 2 Solid, and we'll give you the pros and cons from a perspective of a first-time trekking pole tent owner. Briefly go over this model. If you look down in here, the inner tent material is solid, so you can see this solid white mesh, and that keeps it a little bit warmer. The regular version has just this black mesh and doesn't have this white solid material. The one downfall is you can't really see through the solid material, but it does have fairly large windows. We're gonna start off with by far one of the best innovations that this tent actually has is this roll up here, and there's a little tiny magnet. If you look right here, you can see it, and it's sewn in there. And then there's another one sewn into the line. And when you roll up the door, you just plop it on there, and it actually clicks right into place. It's super easy to do. It actually holds it really well, and when you're ready to take it off, you can actually just pull and the whole thing comes right off. And there you go. Another big bonus for this tent is it's made out of SilPoly, and it has very little stretch to it when it gets wet. We got dumped on last night. It wasn't, we were supposed to have 0% chance of rain, and it rained for probably 4 hours. This thing got plenty wet. I didn't have to adjust it at all. If you look over here, this is our copper spur, and this is made out of SilNylon, and you can see that it's very floppy. It's stretched out quite a bit. And not only that, I had to move this point out. I had to pull pretty much all the stakes out right before bed. So SilNylon versus SilPoly, I definitely like the SilPoly better. This is the two-person tent, and one thing I was a little bit surprised is how big the footprint it takes. Not the footprint of the inner tent, but the footprint of the actual outer rainfly. And this width here was a lot bigger than I thought it was going to be. And then this side is also pretty long. It's pretty equivalent to the copper spur, and that's a three-person tent. This tent comes with 2 vents to help with condensation, one on each corner. And if you look here, it has the standard little Velcro attachment and the little bar that goes in there. It does have a little pull tab on there to help pull it out. As far as stakes go with this tent, they come with the titanium shepherd hooks, which I'm not a big fan of those. We replaced them with the MSR mini groundhogs, which worked pretty well. Bare minimum, they say it takes 4 stakes, out each on each corner. The only problem with that is then your doors don't have the pull out, and I think 6 is the bare minimum for this tent, because when you have your door open, in order to keep your vestibule open, you have to have this stake in. So 6 stakes being the minimum, I still think you should carry 2 more, and that is for this ridgeline right here. And this basically helps pull to keep this ridgeline taut, and if you're in any kind of wind, you're gonna want that. And so these pull out on a weird diagonal. If you look over here, you potentially could need a couple more depending on if you have really bad weather. They have little bitty things here, but they don't have string on them. You had to put string on them. One here, and then one over here in the center. The one thing like about the copper spur is these will actually rest up against the tent. So, but on this one, there's plenty of space open right in here without this being pulled out. Last night with it pouring down rain, this was not resting up against the tent at all. Actually, the inside stayed completely dry. So if you come in here and look at these zippers, they're actually waterproof zippers, and you can definitely tell they are waterproof zippers because there's no holes in there at all. And being waterproof, they're still actually able to pretty easily be used. Some waterproof zippers can get stuck. One thing I've noticed is when you get ready to pull the door open, if this stake doesn't have a really good set in the ground, when you go to pull this door open, it'll have a tendency to want to pull the stake out, which is a pain. So what I do is I just hold the stake side and then unzip it. Interesting part of this door, at the bottom, they included these little tiny clips. And here's a little on the other side, and you can clip this in. And if you look here, you can still have your door closed to have some privacy, but still get a little bit more ventilation. I'm guessing what that's used for. These inside zippers are pretty easy to do. They're not totally one-handed, and that's partially because I think this tent has to be perfectly set up and perfectly square for these things to be totally one-handed. So it's not terrible. And the problem with that is when you set this tent up, you set your first 2 stakes out, and when you set your 3rd stake out, you have to get a perfect 90-degree, and that basically makes sure that your tent is square. And if it's a little bit cockeyed, the inside will want to kind of shift a little bit, and then that can make it, one, you'll have a ripple inside, and two, it makes the zippers a little harder to do. When you roll up these inside doors, it has, instead of a normal toggle, which a lot of tents would have, it has this thing. And these are stretchy cord. And in order to keep your inside closed, you just have to put a little hitch in it. So you loop it through, pull it tight. It works really well to hold it tight. The only problem I have with it is it takes dexterity to actually get a tie in it. So if you have problems with your fingers, that could be difficult. It's also kind of difficult to do when it's cold, because, you know, cold fingers. And then to get it out, sometimes if it's really tight, it could be a little hard. So I like it, but I also don't like it. It would kind of be cool as if they could integrate one of these magnets into this closure as well. These are fantastic. A huge pro for this tent is these giant vestibules. Make sure you have these pulled out, but check out the size of this. With this inside tent being kind of skewed, you get one huge vestibule here and then one on the other side. And it's actually big enough to stick a setup chair completely in there. I actually had my chair in here last night and it stayed dry because it was even stayed away from the tent edges, which were all soaking wet. So having your pack or whatever out here, plenty of space. And to compare that to the copper spur, over here, you can look and see in there, there's not a huge amount of space. Of course, it needs to be pulled out a little bit more, but to give you an idea, you could squeeze a chair in there, but as you can see, it's already starting to push out on the material. So a big pro of the huge vestibules. Another big pro is you can see the amount of distance you have between the inner tent and then the outer wall. So you don't have to worry about the tent sticking up against the wall. The only time I've seen it come close is this, when this is together. Sometimes this gets a little close, but you can see there's a huge amount of space. If you have a lot of condensation, I have yet to have this inner wall get wet from that. Now, what I do want to say, though, is last night when it was pouring, it actually started hailing. I started to get some splashback up on here. I don't know if you can't really see it, but there was a little bit of splashback that actually made it from the outside in there, but not terrible. We really like these big doors. They're placed offset towards the corner, and this pole is completely out of the way. You don't hit it at all when you get in and out. And when you go to sit, show you, you can just pop right in. We really like that. So how much space do you have inside? And for one person, it's awesome. Like I slept here last night. We had plenty of room for 2 packs. And if you look in the corner in here, you can see it even goes farther back in that corner. I have my jackets thrown back in there. So you have quite a bit of space. The problem, well, it's not a problem. It's just something to be aware of. These are 25-inch pads. The other time we stayed, and we had 2 pads in here. There's literally, it goes edge to edge with the pads. You still have a little bit of rooms in the corners, but you definitely aren't getting your packs in here. They'll have to be outside. I really like the headroom inside of this tent as far as sitting up. You have plenty of headroom. As you can see, it goes from corner to corner, diagonal. So you have lots of room here. When you're sleeping on the slope, when you both want to have your heads on one side, the person on the big side has plenty of headroom. But if you look over here, a person's head would be here. They're definitely going to have less headroom. I've done it. It's not a big deal. The pockets on this tent are both pro and a con. I think they're a con because I'm coming from a copper spur, which has like 6,000 pockets, and they're awesome. And you literally have nothing on the ground. This tent has 2 pockets. This main one here, there's one on each door, and then an upper pocket up here. The only kind of thing I don't like about these pockets is when you stick your phone in, there's not a huge amount of support right here. Yeah, it's not open, it's closed right now, but you still can see it kind of flops around a little bit. It just is what it is. It still works. And then this upper one, you can stick your headlamp in if you needed to have some light shining in the tent. So that's actually pretty nice. But even that, you can see that flops around a little bit. You can pull it even tighter. The biggest thing I think we're going to have to get used to is with a trekking pole tent, you are 100% reliant on those main stakes. When I was setting this up, I had it all set up and I was in the middle of doing stuff, and one of these pulled out and the whole thing came collapsing down on me. That doesn't happen on a freestanding tent with outer poles. So it's just something to be aware of. Like if it's in the middle of the night and one of these pulls out, then you could have the whole tent collapse on yourself. Having these pulled out will give you a little extra support. I think if you could probably still lose one and have the tent stay up. One thing we haven't quite figured out yet is how to properly pack this up when it's all completely wet. With a freestanding tent, you can just pop off the rain fly, take it out and shake it off. You can't just pop this off because the whole thing will collapse. And the question is do you take this down with the inner still on, kind of shake it off the best you can, wrap it up? But if you do that, then the water from the outside could transfer to the inside when it's in a big bowl. I don't like that. So the other option is to unclip the inside, take out the inside, then you can take it down. Taking down the inside of the tent is not too bad. There's little clips on each corner that you have to undo and then a clip on each side there. So that's actually pretty easy to do. It's easy to do from the outside because you can see that I can reach this clip here. When you're inside, reaching that far corner can be a little hard. So if it's pouring down rain and you're trying to do it from inside the tent, it's doable. You would want to have a ground cloth or a really good mat to kind of put your knees on while you're trying to reach out to the corners. If you have any advice on how to properly pack this thing up when it's completely wet, we would like to hear that. This is what the tent like and the space-wise you have when there's no inner attached. So if you were just in a bivvy on the ground here, you have plenty of space. I think every tent's gonna have some minor flaws, but as far as our first trekking pole tent, I think this does an excellent job. If you like this video, give us a thumbs up. We will put links to this tent and to our copper spur in the description below. Go watch this video next. You can find us at exploretrekadventure.com and we'll see you next time.